Today we are in Proverbs chapter 12, and we are going to finish the chapter today. Now, as you turn there, and I do suggest that you turn to Proverbs 12 so you can follow along in your Bible. But as you turn there, I have to admit that as I read this week, I was reminded of, I believe it was Office Depot's Easy button. Do you remember that ad campaign? They had a round red button that said easy, and in the commercial, someone would be struggling to find something, to do something. Someone else would say, just hit the easy button, and they'd whack this big button, and everything would fall into place. And Office Depot sold these buttons for a while, and I believe that most of us today would like an easy button for many things. Now, while it's not wrong to do things an easy way, the Proverbs warn us about a lack of diligence, about being lazy in certain things, lazy in our thinking. And today, we do want to have our opinions and our preferences merely confirmed and not challenged. Proverbs warns us against being lazy in our speech, and today we don't want to weigh our words. We want to speak immediately, as soon as anything happens, whether it's national or in our personal lives. We want to speak and to tell the world about it, or at least someone down at the coffee shop. And the Proverbs warn us about being lazy in our work. And indeed, many people today are lazy in their work. And the Proverbs warn us about being lazy in seeking advice. And of course, we struggle with that as well. Now, as we read this, we're going to see these warnings and see what it is to be wise as opposed to being foolish. We're going to take this in three sections: verse 15, verses 16 to 23, and then 24 to 28. Let's begin. Verse 15 of chapter 12. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Now, this tells us that a fool considers his own way the only way. His way is right in his own eyes, and he does not listen to advice. But a wise person listens to advice. Now, at first glance, it would seem that today we are wiser than any people who've ever lived, because whether we are talking to a group of friends or getting a second opinion from the doctor or looking a subject up online, it would appear at first glance that we are all about getting as much advice as possible and taking in as much information as possible. But in reality, being so overwhelmed with sources of advice and information, it is easy to become lazy when it comes to taking advice. Now, I mean this in this sense. Someone who goes to the internet may not actually be looking for advice, but may simply be searching for sources to support what this person already believes, what this person already wants to do. And so we have a certain level of confirmation bias. I believe an article because it says what I already believe. I believe a source because it agrees with me, not because it's necessarily a good argument. And to make matters worse, the algorithms of various news platforms and social media work to make sure we see things that we will engage with. The algorithms, the social media platforms, are about making money and about keeping our attention, not about helping us be good citizens or wise people. And so if you like one article, they start feeding you more just like it. And so pretty soon, your technology is confirming your opinion, your preference, your way, and you have no serious challenge to what you already believe. And many people are content to sit here and to assume that their own way is the only way, the best way, because it's what they believe. Now, the wise listen to advice. Today, let me give you some tips on listening to advice. 1, whether you're talking to friends or searching online, be diligent to listen to people who are good sources. I'm not talking about people who just throw letters after their name and say, I have a degree in something, but listen to people who have experience in a particular area, who are, if you're reading online, backed up by organizations, who are in a position to actually know things beyond their own personal experience. It's funny to me. I am aware of a situation where someone is giving advice and, the entire family says, well, our relative's a doctor, so what he says is true. And he has a degree, but he's a physical therapist, and he's giving advice on the pandemic and virology and immunization. He doesn't have that kind of knowledge. So look for the best sources available, the people who are most likely to know and who've been vetted by others, who don't just claim I am the expert, but who have been vetted by others. If you're talking to personal friends, seek for those who are godly, who know the Word of God and who live well and who are old enough to have experience. Secondly, genuinely seek for viewpoints that contradict your own. Genuinely seek to hear people disagree with you and to disagree with you well. Not the person who's screaming at you that you're wrong, but listen to reasoned arguments for why your viewpoint may not be correct. Listen to those reasoned arguments and weigh them. Listening to advice takes work. Not everyone's going to agree with you. And so as you listen to advice, you have to weigh what is being said, the source it is coming from, what others say, and you have to take into account their advice and either modify your views or what you're going to do, or change it entirely, or say, no, I think you're wrong, and here's my reason why, and not simply that you disagree with me. And then thirdly, there's a principle that has often come in handy for me. It's known as Occam's razor. And some people say Occam's razor means the simplest answer is probably most correct, but that's not actually what it says. Rather, Occam's razor is the principle that the answer is most likely correct, which takes account of the most data with the fewest exceptions. So if you say, well, this is most likely correct because it explains 3 out of 5 facts, and someone else comes along and says, well, here's my answer, and it explains 4 out of 5 facts. The one that explains 4 out of 5 is more likely closer to the truth. If someone comes along and says, I can account for all of the facts, well, then that is an even better answer. It's not necessarily that it's more simple, but it has fewer exceptions while taking into account the most data. And so as we look at things, whether we are looking at vaccines, or issues in our society, cultural issues, or we are looking at just trying to decide what to do in our own personal lives in any given situation, look for the advice that makes the best sense of the most data with the fewest exceptions. And most likely, you'll be finding advice that is sound. And then listen to that advice and don't simply dismiss it, especially if it disagrees with you. So find good sources, good advisors. Listen well to those who disagree with you and don't dismiss them out of hand. And then weigh their advice, asking who can account for the most data with the fewest exceptions. What advice most fully accounts for all that I am dealing with? All right, so the wise seek for advice. Now, it moves on next in the passage to speak about how we speak. And again, in a social media age, we need to give much more thought to how we speak. But even if you're not on social media, you are in context where you speak to other people, and we need to listen to this well. Let's read verses 16 to 23. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. There's one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. No ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. Now, as we look at this is all about speech. And we have to remember that in Proverbs, speech reveals character. Character drives speech. Character drives actions. Now, as we look at this, we also find a poetic pattern, a chiastic pattern, where the first and the last lines correspond. The next lines in correspond, and it gets ever more narrow until the focus is on the center. So we're going to look at these in pairs. We look first at verse 16 and 23. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. And 23, a prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaim folly. Now, what's the point of these? The foolish man displays and proclaims his folly. His anger and his irritation are known at once. He has no sense of when it is appropriate to speak or what is appropriate to speak. He simply wants to get his opinions out there as quickly as possible, and he wants everyone to know what he is thinking. And as a result, he stirs up all kinds of trouble for himself and for other people. Meanwhile, the prudent ignores an insult. The prudent is slow to anger, slow to respond to being provoked. And the prudent man conceals knowledge. This doesn't mean that he hides information from those who need it, but rather his knowledge is not on full display like the folly of the fool is. He is slow to speak, weighing the situation, weighing the people he is speaking to, weighing what will be useful. The prudent man has more knowledge than he speaks, because he is asking not merely what is true, but what is helpful, what is useful, what does the situation call for. And so he weighs his words. He does the work of weighing his words rather than simply speaking whatever comes to his mind. And so we find out that the fool is brash with his words and unconsidered, but the wise man considers what is useful, what is helpful. Now we go in again and we look at verse 17 and verse 22. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. Verse 22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Now as we look at this, the witness in a court of law was your primary form of evidence. And so a witness who lied was harming someone. And in fact, in a murder trial, he could lead to the other person's death. The law of God said that a false witness would, if he was found out, he was to suffer the punishment he was trying to inflict on another person. So a false witness is someone who lies to harm others. And corresponding to that, we are told that lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. The liar will not succeed ultimately because the Lord upholds the moral order of the universe. And so lying may get someone ahead just now. They may gain victory over someone just now, but ultimately the Lord will bring about justice. And so the one who speaks brashly and the one who lies will not succeed. They're not doing the work of being diligent to be truthful even when it's difficult, even when it disadvantages them. They're not doing the work of considering their words. They're being lazy, but in the end, they will suffer for it. Meanwhile, the Lord takes delight in those who are faithful, and the truthful man gives honest evidence. We go in again. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Verse 21, no ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. So here we find that not just lies, but rash, unconsidered words are like sword thrusts. They are damaging. They are destructive. The one who speaks without thinking, who speaks too quickly, who does not weigh his words, brings trouble on himself. Now, he may not be doing the hard work of thinking and weighing his words, of reading them again, of thinking them through, of taking his time. He may have the emotional satisfaction of speaking out, but ultimately his words are destructive, and they're going to bring trouble back on himself as well. Meanwhile, no ill befalls the righteous, and the tongue of the wise brings healing. The wise person considers his words and speaks for the benefit of others, not merely for his own personal satisfaction, but for the benefit and the building up of others. And as a result of the hard work of considering what would be beneficial and wise to speak, he benefits others and no ill befalls him. And then we find out that truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. And so there we find out that truthful lips endure forever. And again, that's because the Lord delights in those who are faithful. But a lying tongue is just for a moment. It may seem easier to lie. It may seem easier to speak brashly, but that's going to bring trouble on yourself, and it's going to result in judgment from God. But those who are truthful endure forever. So two things we find out there. One, character leads to our speech. The righteous man speaks truthfully. And so our speech reveals our hearts. And then secondly, the righteous will be rewarded by God, preserved by God, and indeed appreciated by others. But the liar will suffer the judgment of God and be hated by others and ultimately suffer himself. And so as Christians, we need to be very careful that we speak truthfully, that we speak thoughtfully, not brashly, that we weigh our words, that we consider the situation, and then we speak appropriately for the audience we're speaking to and for the situation into which we are speaking. That we speak considered things that are true, not simply the first things that come to our minds. That we speak for the benefit and the building up of others and not merely for our own personal satisfaction. Now, let's finish this. Verse 24 to 28. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Whoever is slothful will not roast his game, but the diligent man will get precious wealth. In the path of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. Oh, what does this mean? First, it tells us that the diligent will rule. The person who is self-controlled, who is diligent, who works hard, will rise up and he will wind up ruling. He will, wherever he's at, he'll be appreciated. He will advance and he will gain the wealth that comes with being diligent. But the slothful will be put to forced labor. The lazy will end up being enslaved to other people in various ways, and they'll wind up working harder than anyone else. And I have witnessed this. I will never forget a family that I was working with once, and they were so committed to going on Social Security disability that they were working 8 to 10-hour days, calling government agencies, running around the countryside from this city to that city to get paperwork, and they were working to have the government give them money. And I continually thought, if you would simply put this much effort into a job, you would have a paycheck and you wouldn't be working nearly as hard. You wouldn't be nearly as stressed. But they wanted to have someone give them money without working. And there are occasions when that's needed, when someone is genuinely disabled, but this was not an issue of genuine disability, but of simply wanting to take advantage. So this warns us that if we are lazy, we'll wind up working harder. So be diligent. Again, the lazy who put things off, such as car maintenance, and I've experienced this, wind up working harder than anyone because they have bigger problems to deal with down the road than if they had just been diligent all along. And so, again, looking for the easy way out by being lazy will not pay. So be diligent, and you'll wind up having all that you need. It says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Now, anxiety weighs a man down, but a good word makes him glad. So anxiety is hard to deal with. Anxiety is something we shouldn't go through alone. A good word, someone who encourages you, who tells you the truth, is helpful when you're anxious. The warning here is to make sure that you confide in trustworthy, wise people. The one who is righteous is a guide for his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Now, again, this takes us back to where we started. Sometimes all we want is someone to agree with us. And so when we're anxious, we go to those who will not challenge us, who will not contradict us, who will not advise us well. We go to those who sympathize with us and say, oh, yes, your life is miserable. Yes, it's as bad as you think and worse. And they not only sympathize with us, but we wind up feeling more anxious and worse about the world after we talk to them because they go down that dark hill with us, rather than saying, come off and see the truth. God is sovereign. God is in control. And so the warning is to be diligent, to speak, to confide in, to seek out advisors who are wise and godly and righteous, and not merely people who confirm your biases and who confirm your story and who are easy because they agree with you and never disagree. It might be more emotionally satisfying at first to have someone just nod their head and say, yes, yes, yes. But the wise seek out good, godly, righteous advisors who will give them a good direction, will tell them the truth. And that truth is ultimately encouraging in what is needed more than simple agreement. So the way of the wise is not always easy, but it leads to better ends. The wise accept advice and seek it out well. The wise are truthful and careful in their speech. The wise work and are diligent. And the wise choose their advisors well, not merely looking for people to agree with them, but seeking truth and wisdom. I hope you'll take these things to heart and be diligent in your speech, Be diligent in your thoughts, be diligent in your work, and be diligent concerning who you listen to. I'll see you next time.